they all need to be better. And I think that the standard needs to be what it was from 15 to 17, even 18. Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers for The Athletic. Patrick, we recorded last right before Thursday's game, and a lot happened. That was Craig Counsell had some very pointed comments about the direction of this organization. He didn't mince his words. There's a big gap. This team needs to be, building 90-win teams. And then the players backed him up. And on Monday in Philadelphia, Jed Hoyer agreed. So they're in agreement. Now they got to go do it. Everybody wants to win. Now build a team, right?
You were there somewhere. Carlos Zambrano saying we stinks, muttering that. Everyone.
This is I don't think this is shocking in any. Nobody should be shocked by it. I think it's nice for the fans to hear. I think it was good for Counsell to be so blunt. I wasn't there on Thursday when this was said, so why don't you kind of share how it came across and kind of like the reaction to that?
Well, it started Thursday with like 5 minutes of questions about Julian Merriweather's knee surgery or something like that. Like there was a long drawn out injury update line of questioning. And then, Counsell, as you know, Sahadev, had been very much deferential in terms of like just one kind of how he came into this job of not being like, I have all the answers or like, I'm going to put my stamp on this, but also evasive when asked those like big picture questions. Like he didn't want to send a message that, quote, we're done when we're not done. And the Brewers clinching the division that early and the Cubs playoff odds at that point, at zero or slightly above zero kind of gave him an opening to, I think I'd essentially asked him about, areas to improve now that, the division race is over and that he had this chance to talk a little more directly and frankly. And he said, there's a big gap. And like, that's not controversial, right? I mean, it was like roughly a 10-game deficit at that point, the team that they're chasing. But I think one, you could tell he was annoyed, not at the question, but just at he's bothered by this season, and that you could tell in the urgency to his voice, there's a little different edge to his voice. And then I think it landed differently because he's always been about win tonight's game. We got a game tonight. Now we got a game tomorrow. We got a game the day after that. And I have outgetters, and we got to just stack up good at bats. Like all that stuff, and then for him to just, in the middle of September, be like, we should be trying to build 90-win teams around here, which, the way it kind of struck me a couple of days later as I was kind of processing all this, like it was like super direct and also vague enough to just like point the finger at everyone. And I don't think he wasn't saying, he wasn't putting it as us versus them. He used we over and over again. He did not use any specific names, but I think it all falls under the same umbrella of like ownership, setting priorities, the business side, giving the Cubs maximum resources as a big market team. And then clearly Jed Hoyer and Carter Hawkins, their baseball operations department, delivering more talent over and over again. And this just has not been good enough. The standings tell us that every single day, but I just think, what it's like in that Wrigleyville bubble, like day after day of like a lot of positivity or a lot of like, even keel, it's a long season, it's a marathon, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you look up and you're 10 games behind the team you're chasing.
Yeah, I liked how some of the team leaders backed it up.
Yeah.
And two guys in particular, Jamison Tyone and Dansby Swanson, are guys that came from winning organizations. Tyone spent multiple seasons with the Yankees. He'll talk about his time there a lot because it made him, it had an impact on the way he behaves, the way he looks at the game, what expectations should be for players and the team as a whole. It doesn't, like, a bad season there, a disaster season there is like the season the Cubs are going through right now. That's a disaster, right?
Yeah.
This is a step forward for the Cubs right now. The last two seasons are like a step forward from what they were in 21 and 22.
Yeah.
That cannot be the standard, right? So Tyone is very aware of what needs to be done and what it feels like when 90 wins is the minimum, right? Like, that's what should absolutely be happening every year. Dansby Swanson came from Atlanta, where they've built this juggernaut, and they're going through one of those down seasons again. They're ahead of the Cubs. He said some interesting things, I thought. His brother-in-law is Jace Peterson, who played with the Brewers, and he talked about how they're really good at identifying very specific traits, whether it's on-field, off-field, whatever it is, style of play, and having that fit into the team. Now, I think that's interesting. I think, are the Cubs good enough at finding those things, those little edges, right? And then it's just as simple as like spending aggressively, being aggressive, being creative. He did mention, Dansby Swanson said, we're a big market team. We have money. Like, we should act like it. And I think, that they want to dominate this division. They think they should. I thought it was interesting to listen to the players speak so frankly, because it wasn't like last year. It was like, there was the disappointment of not just falling short, having it, in your control. So it wasn't as like, we got to be better, this is unacceptable type stuff, right? Like, you just didn't get that vibe. It was like, we had this and we missed out.
It. Yep.
Yeah. And this year this is not good enough. Like, we need to be better. And Swanson, all of them, to their credit, it didn't seem like nobody really seemed like they were saying like, this is everyone's fault but mine. It wasn't one of those situations. Swanson said, I have to look inward. How can I make sure that my second half is a full season? I can't have down moments like I did this season. I thought that was, I appreciate hearing that. Counsell wasn't like, everyone else is doing terribly. Jed was clear that it's from the top down, and he needs to be better. They all need to be better, and I think that the standard needs to be what it was from 15 to 17, even 18, even like 18. Remember when 18 was a disappointment and it was 95 wins?
Yeah, was that our offense broke that year?
Yeah, that was the offense broke. And
to do that with Darvish or Chatwood, they spent just a ton of money on pitching, and to piece together 95 wins, and just how furious Theo was, and how I think that was the post-game clubhouse where like John Lester was kind of like, sometimes you need to get kicked around. The quote I'm talking about. Before you. Sometimes that has to happen in order for you to kind of grow. And I do think that was sort of my interpretation of Craig's being like, we should be shooting for 90 win teams around here, of just the like, not that everything has to be a what would Theo do or anything like that, but just the sense of purpose and the focus and intensity that I think the entire Cubs organization had kind of heading into 15 and 16, when you look at the stadium renovations, signing John Lester, #1 farm system in the game. And not just because they had like a lot of depth, but because they had an MVP coming, they had all-stars coming, they had, postseason legends coming. Like, looking up and down this organization right now, being around it every day, you do not get that sense at all. You get a sense of like, our process is well-reasoned and smart, and we have a lot of flexibility, and, we want to be sustainable.
You know what doesn't make sense? Nasal hygiene isn't often part of our everyday routines, and it should be. Enter Navage Nasal Care. It's a game changer. Scotty, give us the play-by-play, please.
Kratz, Navage uses smooth saline flow and gentle patented nasal suction to clear nasal passages, and it works fast. Navage is drug-free and uses 99.9% pure saline salt pods with no medicinal side effects.
It's taken my breathing to a new level and my snoring down to an all-time low.
Start breathing easier today. Order the Navage Starter Pack. It comes with everything you need to get started. You'll love this. Our listeners can get a free cleaning kit as a gift, but only when you order through our exclusive URL, navage.com/foul, and use our promo code FOUL. Again, to order your Navage and free cleaning kit and for full product details, go to navage.com/foul. That's promo code FOUL at navage.com/foul.
I guess that's probably a good place to pivot. Like, what was the scene like in Philadelphia on Monday? As Jed Hoyer certainly had a few days to process those comments, and he's always someone who is very thoughtful in his responses, but also very careful in terms of how he tailors his messages.
Yeah, he agreed with them. I don't know how you can disagree.
True.
I don't know what the standings are at this very moment, but it was 9-7 entering yesterday. 9 games back of the Brewers, 7 games back of the wild card. It's around there still, right? Because they lost on Monday. But he agreed. Look at the standings. This is obvious. We have more work to do. I think you can listen to all of that and feel encouraged if you're a fan, right? But I think it's nice to have the acknowledgement. I think fans that are expecting the opposite of what we've been saying, which is they're not don't expect Juan Soto, Corbin Burns is even a long shot. They're going to be more aggressive. They're going to make more moves this winter, in my opinion. I believe. I think they know they have to. I just don't think the philosophy is going to be shifting drastically. I think this quote is important to listen to hear. All of us, from me down, we have to look at what we need to do this offseason and going forward to get to that place consistently. It's not about doing it once. It's about getting to a place where we feel like we can do it consistently. I mean, you hear that, and I hope fans can interpret that. They're not looking for the quick fix. They're not going to have this offseason where they make a bunch of trades to they empty out the farm system and they spend on the biggest free agents. Now, is that that doesn't, I don't want to make it sound like I'm setting fans up for disappointment, right? I don't want fans to think well, that means they're doing nothing. There's another way to do it, right? And I think even when Tyone was asked, he brought up how Aaron Judge is, that helps a lot of things with New York.
Yeah.
And someone followed up. He's like, you brought up Aaron Judge. Does this team need a superstar? And he's like, superstars help, but I don't want to act like there's one way to win. He's like, look at what the Brewers are doing.
Yeah.
And I think he's right. I think that's frustrating for fans to hear. And I empathize with them. I totally get where they're coming from, because listen, Juan Soto solves a lot of problems. And I think you could absolutely justify whatever bad may be on the back end of that contract. I think you reap the benefits tenfold in the first, whatever you want to say, 5-7 years of that deal.
Yeah.
But I think you're wasting time thinking about that too much, because it's not the reality that the Cubs are living in. So I don't think you have to have a Michael Busch, Shoto Imanaga offseason, which turned out to be great acquisitions, right? But at the time, it was felt underwhelming. I think they can have an offseason that feels really strong, but isn't Juan Soto and the obvious, and trading all the prospects. So there's somewhere in between, right? But it's just this is not. It's interesting that they're playing the Phillies as he says all this stuff, because that's what the Phillies did. And in my mind, I wonder is there a way to do both? And I think you're seeing that with the Dodgers. You're starting to see it with the Mets. I think the Mets are fascinating with what they've been able to do, because they had that down year where they spent so much and they were able to quickly reset, and they have this executive that's lauded around the game. And you could make the argument that it's Andrew Friedman, David Stearns, and then all the rest, right? It's impressive with how quickly and their system has turned around, right? So you can do it. You can do it. There's a way to do it. I just don't know if the Cubs are ever going to spend like a top 5 market should. I am a little surprised that they're all the way down at like 9 or 10. I'm not sure if they're going to get up to top 5, and I think that's something we'll have to continue to look at, Patrick, because I think that's the biggest thing that I point to. It's like, well, yeah, you can be frustrated with Jed Hoyer, and I get it. He has to use the money that he has well, right? He has to if he's been inefficient in any way, you can say like, well, why is he spending money here? Why is he paying this guy? Why isn't he why are the Brewers able to do this and the Cubs aren't, right? That's fair. But you also have to point higher and say, like, why aren't you acting like a top 5 market? Like, why are you acting like this team, can be outspent by San Diego or Texas or Atlanta? Like, there's no reason for that, in my opinion. There's just no reason. They pack that stadium, they pack that ballpark, they make loads of money around the ballpark. There's no issues there. Finances shouldn't be an excuse.
And even if Counsell didn't say this, just his presence and this record has really exposed almost everyone in the Wrigley Field office building. I mean, sure, it's what's the word I'm looking for? It is smart of the Cubs, or it's empowering for ownership to tell the lead baseball executive of like, hey, go out, hire the best person you think for the job. And, whatever the salary scale is, like, don't worry about it. These are your resources. Allocate them however you see fit. It's great in theory. But Counsell is still basically like paid like what, like maybe like a number 4 starter, you know what I mean? Or if you look at, a decent leverage reliever, however you want to look at it, whether it's the annual value or the overall value, it is obviously substantial. It's reset the bar for managers, but it's not that big in the grand scheme of Major League Baseball economics. And I think we all agree Craig Counsell has a great resume and totally understand the hire. Cubs should be in a good place for the next 4 years with him running their team, but he has not made any sort of dent in the standings or has not closed that gap. The Brewers obviously still kept running away with it, and I think that exposes some of the payroll stuff you're talking about. Like if you go back to 2016, a lot of teams' economic outlooks changed, and a lot of those teams are in the National League. I mean, I'm not sure exactly when John Middleton took over the Phillies, but obviously you're talking about that Bryce Harper pursuit. He was involved in that. Steve Cohen taking over the Mets. You have the Braves. Forget when that stadium opened, but obviously it's been a huge economic, boom for that team. You had what the Padres did with Peter Seidler before his passing. So you have all these teams that are in the playoff mix, and that have shown how. Or team that won last year's World Series, the Texas Rangers. Obviously, they kind of retreated this year, but the Cubs staying essentially flat while these other teams just kind of race towards the top of the payroll scale. It makes a difference, and I think everyone expected the bullpen to be better, the Cubs to be better in one-run games just because of the guy in the dugout. It doesn't quite work that way. I think the Cubs pipeline has not been good enough, clearly. I'm not sure how much they can count on. And it gets to, when we're talking about sustainability and things like that, like, what is this best version of this next great Cubs team? Like, are you going to wait around for Owen Casey and Matt Shaw to figure out how to hit major league pitching and then to like get to whatever Joe Madden's level 5 stage of only caring about winning? Like, there's a lot of steps to go. They've squandered some, great seasons from, Justin Steele and Shoto Imanaga over the last couple of years. Cody Bellinger's comeback player of the year campaign last year. Like, you can't, like, it all sounds great in theory, the stuff that Jed is talking about. I just don't know if that's how baseball really works, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, that last point is so true. Great seasons for certain individuals, right?
Mhm.
That guarantees nothing. It guarantees nothing for 2025. I don't know. I feel good about Ian Happ having his third consecutive, consistent, strong season. Yeah, that makes me confident that he can do it again in 2025. Does Dansby Swanson's second half ease any concern that he was falling off a cliff post 30? Sure. Shota Imanaga, like, go down the list. Michael Busch breakout rookie season. I don't know which one of them is going to go back down next year. One of them will, if not multiple,
for sure.
right?
Yeah.
And I don't know which one. And then there's going to be someone that pops up. But who gets hurt? You cannot predict these things. So you have to have a deep roster. You have to have multiple talents that can carry the load when someone else is struggling or hurt or whatever it may be. They haven't built that yet. They don't have that right now. The Brewers, we'll just keep going back to the Brewers because we have said it over and over again, but it does, like, so many different things happen to them in the offseason and during the season, and they are going to win the division by nearly double digits. And that says something about the organization. Maybe there's a little luck involved, but when it happens year after year after year, you got to stop. They're doing something right, and I think it stands out to me this season in particular when you lose everyone that you did, your manager, your head of baseball operations, your ace, in the middle of the season, your superstar bat, and you don't miss a beat, and you never really get threatened for the division. There's something there, and that's just one organization, right? I'm not even talking about finances there and being aggressive and being the National League Central's biggest market by far, and not leveraging your finances in a way where you can kind of just barrel through the competition and just dominate. And that's what they want. That's the players have said it, and it's not it's not as and it's not just as simple as signing Juan Soto, but there are ways that it's like, well, why does it have to be 230 240 million when all these other teams are up to 260 270? That's I know it feels like we're repeating ourselves, but I think that's sometimes this blame gets spread around. Jed Hoyer needs to be better and get the right players, but he really needs to work. He should be working with more as well.
I mean, you're talking about at least 30 million, at least one great player, maybe two good players, maybe one solid player, and then a bunch of other, kind of role players that, your model tells you will work with this group. And no doubt, like, teams do win without the biggest payroll. Maybe they don't win the World Series, but they win annually. But, like, it's not like the Cubs are charging Tampa Bay prices for a Tampa Bay ballpark experience. And so, I do think the Cubs have it down pat, just looking at the standings of, like, their pitching and depth and sort of like just two-way competence and kind of organizational systems. Like, they haven't bottomed out, and I think they are good at padding their run differential and sort of like, finishing with that 82, 83 wins. I think they could probably roll that out for a couple years and they'd be pretty confident that they're not going to be in last place. But you look at, something as small as like all those tiebreakers, right? Like, have they had a winning record against anyone that's going to make the playoffs? There may be one. Maybe they tied the Dodgers. Either way, like when we're looking at sort of the like, we're in September. Oh yeah, add one more game to the games back because they lost the season series to the Diamondbacks, the Padres, the Braves. It just, they're not better than these playoff teams, and like this stuff isn't static. Like, not saying, the Nationals are going to make the playoffs next year, but like they're clearly trying to build something. Like, I don't know if the Reds' next manager will have some sort of like magic formula, but like they got a lot of interesting young players that they were supposed to take a step forward this year. Like, don't know what's going to happen with the Giants, but like they're a team that wants to spend money and that has spent some money on players and like is sort of in that same bracket as the Cubs of like the middle of the National League trying to break through. And you're right about the Mets. I mean, the Mets could be building like the Dodgers of the East, and maybe the Phillies will fall off a cliff, but like who knows where we'll all be by then. Like this is baseball. Counsell put it well the other day of like nothing is promised for next year, and so sure, like I will give Jed credit in terms of like I did not see Isaac Paredes trade coming. Michael Busch was not really on our radar. Shota certainly was, but I did not expect him to be this good, this fast, and this good on a sustained run, really from wire to wire, like dominance as the most valuable player on this team. So sure, there are definitely moves that they could pull off this winter that takes them there. Just like we always say, what Theo would say, like just have to be right.
Yeah, and you mentioned those moves there at the end, like the Isaac Paredes, Michael Busch, Shota. Like more of those are going to be needed. There's not, if it's not the quick fix, then there's not an obvious way to do this. So it takes creativity, aggressiveness, and like a lot of due diligence. And it started probably around the deadline, right? Like a lot of times when you talk to scouts out at ballparks at the deadline, they're scouting for the offseason as well. That's kind of when it starts. So this process has started, but we're not really going to know what's happening for like another 6 weeks or so, right? We've got some time before we really understand what, and even then, geez, it's probably longer than that, right? Because that's only like a week into November. So we're gonna have to wait to really understand what's happening, how they're gonna attack this. So we've got some time to figure it out and break it all down. 5 more games to get through on this season. Obviously they don't mean much. There's not a lot to break down there, but it's going to be a long, yet again, a critical. Every offseason is critical. I've realized I've been saying that for 10 years. So every offseason is
this
critical.
Is the big one.
They have some work to do, and it's going to be fascinating to see how they execute, if they can execute and put together a team that you feel good about on paper, and ultimately none of that matters. We're gonna have to see how next season goes. It's a big one for Jed and Carter in the front office, in my opinion. When I say critical, it's for them. This could be the offseason that determines how long they're around. Patrick, we'll have more for the fans the rest of this week. Thanks so much to all of you for listening to Northside Territory. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to The Athletic, where you can read all of our work. We're happy to provide all the insight we can on the Cubs for all of you. Thanks for listening. Take care.